Welcome, Ron, to Creator in Conversation. How are you today?
I'm well, thanks for having me, man.
I really appreciate it. I think last time we actually sat down face to face and had a conversation was in a pizzeria just after Dublin Comic Con a couple
Yeah,
of
I mean
years ago now.
there might have been a beer or two involved, as I recall.
That's probably it indeed. And yeah, that was your first time in Ireland, was it, when you came over for Dublin Comic Con?
Yeah, first time. I would love to get back. That's actually been one of my favorite convention trips, period. Just because
Oh, that's
it fit me, and you guys treated me great. I mean, everybody in the city treated me great. I literally don't think I paid for a beer the entire time I was there. Like complete strangers would come up and say, "Oh, you're not from here. Have a beer."
no, no, you were meant to pay. I have your bill right here. As soon as you get back off the plane, we'll hit you with the bill. No, that's fantastic. And so I was just saying before we began recording, it must be an exciting time because at the moment Superman's just being released, and we have Fantastic Four around the corner, and obviously, starting with Superman, you kind of did one of the all greatest Superman shorts with the it was the Adventures of Superman, wasn't it? It was Only Son. Was that correct? Am I getting the title? Or am I
Yeah, yeah,
fluffing?
that's it.
That was a brilliant one shot. W Conceptually, was it when the influence on its sleeve with the kind of an Iron Giant-esque character? Do you have much love for that film as well to marry the
I
two?
Iron Giant type character. I have no idea what you mean. Uh, yeah, Iron Giant is one of my favorite films, period. Not just animated films, but probably top five for me all time. I think it's just perfect. And so the Superman nature that is very obvious in the Iron Giant film felt like, well, that we need to play with that a little bit more. So when DC asked me for pitches for the Adventures series, which was digital first. It was sort of uh, half pages, and then it would get collected. I sent in, I think, three different pitches, but that was the one I really wanted to do. That was the one that was calling to me. So thankfully, that's the one they chose, and I talked them into Doc Shaner as the artist, and it's honestly one of my favorite things I've ever done in my career. It you get those jobs that just turn out exactly like you want them to, and that's one of them.
But no, it's a beautiful piece, like art and story, fantastic. Like, and Doc just knocked it out of the park as well. With regards to actually just on Iron Giant, I was fortunate enough to actually be in a kind of a meet and greet Q&A at the American Ambassador's House here in Dublin, and Brad Board was the guest speaker, and he was talking about working on the Iron Giant, talking about obviously Toy Story and The Incredibles and everything else, and what was amazing was he was just like, and Warner Bros. Just did not know what they had on their hands with Iron Giant, because afterwards, when it came out, straight to video, huge success. And it's just like most of his career just seemed to have been. And this group didn't know what they had on their hands. With The Incredibles, it was they released at Christmas, and they were like, if they'd done it in summertime, they would have made money through the ceiling. Um, but yeah, no, it's a great piece. And for you, what was your Superman growing up then? Were you first introduced to him through comics, or did you discover perhaps George Reeves or Chris Reeve first?
I probably animation, as a real little kid watching the 60s shorts in reruns,
Yeah.
and then the Super Friends stuff, which were not great cartoons, not great animation, but it's what we had, man. We were happy to have it. So that was probably my first exposure, and then I was there for the Christopher Reeve movie in the theaters. I mean, it was a huge deal when
Mm,
that came out. I was a kid, but um, it was certainly it was certainly the next big thing after Star Wars. Star Wars came out in 77, and then Superman in 78, and just the I think it's difficult for people now to kind of understand how much of a cultural phenomenon things were back then, because was the media wasn't all splintered, and um so things like Superman and Star Wars lasted a year in sort of the cultural zeitgeist, and now we get stuff for like 2 weeks. So Superman was a huge deal. I remember seeing it. It came out at Christmas, and I can remember going to the theater with my parents or my mom. I think just my mom went that day, and took me to the theater, and was a little bit of snow spitting outside. I mean, I have very specific memories of that day, and then that whole you will believe a man can fly thing was the real deal. You came out of that theater feeling like you had seen something that you had never seen before.
Oh no, it's like even I didn't see it in the cinema till much, much later. But I remember watching it on TV at home. But that the interpretation, the character of the original, the Donna series, that's fantastic. But in the lead up to the release of the latest film from James Gunn, Michael Uslan, who is the producer behind every Batman film since '89, was sharing on Facebook some of the origins and inspirations for the Joe Shuster in drawing Superman. And along the way, he revealed that in addition to the Fleischer, because I first discovered the character through the Fleischer animation,
Oh
because
yeah.
in the '90s, it was public domain because Paramount basically massively just stole from Fleischer, just ripped their company from underneath them, but packaged everything as when it became public domain, VHS tapes. So that's what I grew up watching. But Michael Uslan revealed there's actually a letter in which they were going to do a black and white Batman series. And this just blew my mind because BTAS obviously was inspired by the Fleischers, but the fact that the Fleischers would have actually done like a noir Batman series is what I wouldn't give to see
That's
that.
amazing. I
But
had never heard that. I mean, I know
yeah, yeah,
Mike. I've never heard that story.
yeah, next time you're talking to him, because like this is like he said it so he dropped it so casually, and everyone was like, "What?" And he says, "I've seen the letter." He said a little something called World War II happened, which prevented it from from
Yeah.
see it becoming true. But man, have you had the opportunity to see the latest offering by James Gunn and Co. yet for Superman? Or you've got
No,
to
I
wait?
haven't. I unfortunately, I'm occupied with comic deadlines that demand me to sit right here and do what I do. And then I've got a softball game tonight, and a dinner meeting tomorrow, and a softball game Wednesday night. And then I fly to Atlanta on Thursday, so it might have to wait until next weekend. I don't know. Yeah, I'm jumping through my skin to see it because everything seems like it's right up my alley. Everything seems like this is the kind of Superman that I'm familiar with and show up for. Uh, but the dirty secret of comics is that you don't get to rush right out to the movies when you want to, and you don't get to read as many comics as you really want to because you're too busy making them.
Yeah, that's the two-edged sword of it all. Gotta to make that which you love. It's sometimes hard to carve out time to enjoy it as well. I find it with many creators, the reading pile grows and grows and
Oh
grows for
yeah.
them as well, because they're so busy making comics they can't sit down to actually read and enjoy it at the moment. Um, and at the moment, the next big cinematic offering coming up would be Fantastic Four as well. And obviously, with your association with Silver Surfer, although this is going to be a different version of Silver Surfer coming out as well. But were you always a big fan of the FF going back to Kirby and Co, or did you come to the FF later stage?
No, I really came to it later.
Mhm.
The initial Kirby stuff, the classic '60s Kirby stuff. I found a lot of it in a box in our basement growing up. My older brother had left behind a bunch
Nice.
of comics, and the Kirby stuff just freaked me out. Like the Kirby stuff was um so stylized and blocky. Those big square fingers. It kind of freaked me out as a kid, but I kept going back to it as a kid. Like
Mhm.
I would put those books aside and be like, "Oh, that makes me feel creepy." Um, but then I would keep going back to it. There was something about that completely lured me in all the time. Um, so I didn't really become an FF fan until I was older, really until I was kind of on the cusp of being a pro and going back and reading that initial, 100 issues of Stan and Jack, which is to great extent the real basis for the Marvel Universe. That's where, a lot of the ideas were germinated. So now I look at it as sort of the Holy Grail. But as a kid, I just FF didn't really do it for me like Batman and Superman did.
Yeah, no, it's and particularly Kirby's style, like it almost sounds blasphemous to say it, but initially he's one that it's a style that kind of grows on you after a time as well because he's such a unique approach to how he draws because it's not the way he draws a person isn't necessarily anatomically to measure. It's like an indication of like this line here represents a sinew in an arm or a leg. If you ask him if Kirby to draw a car, he can draw a Kirby-esque car, but not the car outside your window. But it's a lot of like real thought and design. I found with the I think it was the third offering from for the Thor series, not the Dark World, but the one came after where they do like Planet Hulk as well. But that was really like seeing a Kirby design come to life on the screen, and also the distinguished competition at the time with their previous DC cinematic offering. A lot was Kirby ideas as well with Darkseid and stuff. His
Oh yeah.
impact is huge. It's still crazy to this day how many people um, aren't as aware of Kirby as say Stan Lee, because Stan Lee was around to have the
Well,
cameos and such. You know.
sure, Stan. I mean, Stan was the face,
Hmm.
and that was probably Stan's best skill, frankly, was being the face. Uh, and certainly Jack and Ditko and John Buscema,
Hmm.
um, those guys were in their studios doing their work, and so Stan was out there beating the drama. Both were necessary components, obviously.
Hmm.
Um, but in terms of who created more of the Marvel universe, I think it's those guys. I think it's the artists because they brought all of that. They brought all of that vast talent that they all had to bear in a very fruitful, creative time where nobody was looking over their shoulder and telling them what to do. Um, so, those guys were necessary for the creation, and then I think Stan was necessary to humanize those creations and to then spread the word. He was the preacher. He was the proselytizer, bringing people in.
No, absolutely. I just wrapped a three-part miniseries on Steve Ditko. We interviewed Dr. Zach Crucy, who is an academic who wrote about Ditko's work. Jack C. Harris, who worked with Steve Ditko, particularly his DC books as well as creator-owned, and Mark Zenditko, who is Ditko's nephew. And Mark actually sent me a copy of 16 mini essays that Steve wrote on the creation of Spider Man because it was kind of publicly perceived he wouldn't really talk publicly about like creation or the work. And it's true, he felt the work should speak for itself. But it seems first and foremost, he was also about how the truth was represented. So when I read those essays, it was something of a revelation of some of the ideas that were suggested and declined or reworked. And even Kirby at one stage was claiming the creator status to Spider-Man, and we can link that back to when he walked on the fly as well. But
Yeah.
it's insane. Comic book history is by far the most interesting of our history, just
Well,
because of the personalities, I think.
yeah, well, and so much of it is muddy. So much of it was done on the fly with no
Hmm.
supervision. And then you moved on to the next thing. It wasn't like uh, you had another book to do next month or next week, frankly. They were churning stuff out so fast. So yeah, I mean, I think the 60s Marvel was just like, to me, that's the bombshell
Hmm.
of comics, period.
Hmm.
Um, because it was such a different take on superheroes and storytelling in general. Um, and obviously we're living in that world now. The this used to be our secret language. Like if you read comics and that was the only place you could get Galactus coming down and threatening to eat Manhattan. Those were the stories that you could only tell in comics, and now that's not the case anymore. Now everybody can experience those stories because we tell them, we tell them in other places. So which I think is great. I mean, obviously we want this culture of ours to spread, but there was also something charming when it was just us, when it was that you had to go to a comic to get this kind of story, because the vast majority of people who see Superman or who see Fantastic Four in a couple of weeks are probably not going to go pick up a comic after that. It's a movie to them, it's entertainment, and then they'll move on. Which is okay. It's not there's not an entrance exam. But uh, there's part of me that also feels like, oh man, if we could just get a little bit of that audience that shows up for the films to engage with comics, we'd be a lot better off as a business.
No, absolutely. It's a really interesting point you hit upon because DC in particular, John, when Watchmen was about to be released cinematically, they had a whole strategy of this is going to get more eyeballs on Watchmen. They're going to want to read the comic then, and even the direct-to-video animation adaptations that they did, they had at one stage, I think it was like Batman Year One as an animated film and Dark Knight Returns, but you get the graphic novel with the Blu-ray in it as well and
Yeah.
stuff. And they really invested, and it made a sound strategy. It was like, well, if the film does well, people want the books, but they realized it doesn't translate that way. And it wasn't just comics; it was like Game of Thrones, Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, whatever. Some people would just see the film, and as you say, just see it as a film franchise didn't necessarily mean to go back, read the book. Those who had read the book would also see the film. That conversion was stronger, but it didn't convert from if you first seen it on screen as much back to the book. It's just curious how people will would interact with the characters and stories as
Or
well. And
well,
mhm.
films are passive.
Yep.
Films are they're particularly passive if you're just watching them at home. You don't have to go to any effort. You have to press a button. If you're going to go see a film in a theater, that yes, you have to put some effort into that. You have to leave the house. You have to go get the tickets. You have to sit through 45 minutes of previews. Um, so so film is much more passive than engaging with a comic, because the comic is you have to bring something to it. You have to put in the effort, and you have to fill in the blanks of the story that take place in the gutters. That's the nature of comics, and I think a lot of people are just not, well, a lot of people just don't read, period. That's what it comes down to, is that a lot of people, it's not that people don't read comics, people don't read anything.
Mhm.
Um, except maybe closed captions on TikTok videos. Uh, so that's the world we live in. It's frankly neither good nor bad. It just is what it is. But I think that the efforts that were made and are being made to get this material in front of people is necessary. And we should always be trying to lure in the people that find this passively, that find this stuff through film or television or video. Um, because you're not going to convert all of them, but you might convert some of them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the point on reading is like that's never been more important because as someone who works in academia, it's becoming more and more concerning because I'll always remember as a student, my undergraduate was in history, and we were set a paper on a particular subject, and our lecturer was the world expert on the particular item we were writing about. And of course, we all went to Wikipedia, and he was cited as the main source on Wikipedia. But what he had done unknown to us was alter Wikipedia because you can do that. And he goes in, he altered it to be not factual. And then when we submit our homework, he all just, derides it's going, you all went to Wikipedia. And our defense was, but you were quoted as the source. And then he goes, why didn't you go direct to the source then? Like instead of going through like this third party interpretation. And that's kind of when you fail to do your reading, essentially, you're watering down and diluting, getting directly to the source of information itself. And it's a risky game. It's a risky game in academia, but now in our everyday life, it's getting even riskier now still. But the UK released some reports at the moment saying that they found children are reading comic books more, and it's encouraging to read. So the UK, even though they had Dundee, where they print the Beano and the Dandy and so much, they're finally investing heavily and significantly in comic book production as an industry there, which is great to see. And we wish you could see more of it around. In recent years, there seems to be a dynamic shift towards children-focused genres within
Oh
within
yeah.
comic books or graphic novels. Yeah. Have you much experience in that field, or have you noticed much in the way of a shift in that regard yourself?
Well, I think the shift is very obvious because the young reader um, section of the store just
Hmm.
grows and grows and grows, which is great. Now, like not all of those kids are going to keep reading comics, and not all of those kids are gonna funnel their way into Marvel and DC comics. I think we're much better off now because we have a lot more offerings in comics. When I was a kid, you had Marvel or DC books, and that was kind of it.
Yeah.
Like once in a while there was a stray odd publisher out there, and then little by little, other publishers with other offerings started to crop up, and not always last, but some of them did. Some of them are still with us. Dark Horse. Um, it was. I think we're in a much better place now, um, but we have to keep feeding that audience that's discovering stuff at 6 or 8 or 10 years old. We have to keep producing material that they're interested in, not just expect them to go, oh, well, I'm 12 now, I'm gonna go read Fantastic Four, because I don't think that that's a viable pathway. Um, there are a lot of people who are real comics fans who just have no interest in superheroes.
Hmm.
And that's understandable. For a long time, that's all we offered. Now it's obviously much more diverse, both in terms of the kinds of stories we're telling and the people who are telling those stories. We just have to keep expanding, and I think honestly, the packaging that we put these things in is evolving, but it has to evolve faster. The single issue comics that you and I grew up with, and that the Wednesday Warriors show up at the shop for every week.
Yeah.
That's a very niche market. That's a very specific, very loyal audience, but it's not a huge audience. I think the notion of graphic novels, or at least, you know, books that are 60, 80 pages long to give you a bigger chunk of material, are probably what a lot of those kids that are reading those kind of books now are going to be looking for when they're 12, 14, 16. Um, and hopefully the industry is going to be there to provide it, but we're a shoestring budget kind of business for the most part. So shelling out money for 80 or 100 pages of content, as opposed to 20 pages of content at a time, is not the economic that most American publishers work on. We
Hmm.
have to sell issue 7 so that we can pay for the production of issue 9. Which is, look, it's not a great economic model, and it puts everybody in the position of not knowing whether we're going to be here in 6 months on a particular title. Even Marvel and DC. It's a it's a very razor thin margin, uh, and obviously the distributor wars haven't helped either.
Yeah, no, it's been crazy in the last while. We've seen some of the biggest seismic shifts in the comic book distribution area since, I say early 90s, if even that. But it is true. It's important that we look towards the next generation. Because like it's interesting. I work on a lot of classic characters like Flash Gordon and Phantom, which I get back to because we collaborated a bit on Phantom stuff. But it was what we've explored as well, with a character like the Phantom, very old and but a huge fan base. Now the fan base, although old, has disposable income, but that's very finite. So we need to make content to appeal to the younger generation to bring them in.
Oh
But
yeah.
also the delivery of the format though is the newspaper strip. And I've been doing more publishing newspaper strips in recent years than like full comics. And people were like, well, is that not a step backwards? And I was like, well, technically, if you look at the web comic format, something like webtoons as well, that has been a revelation for readers because it's getting serialized stories and it helps the model a bit. Because when you look at, like, don't get me wrong, I pick up monthly comics as well and single issues every week, but uh, for the amount that you spend in comparison to, let's say, a Netflix subscription or something else.
Sure.
It's hard to reckon. You're paying essentially for a chapter a month of a book, and then the trade comes. If it wasn't for the collector's mentality, it seems so antithetical. Businessmen can't wrap their minds around how comics ever turn money around when you look at weekly issues. Um, but the digital format, and we're seeing more, particularly Instagram, a lot of the web comics that Eisner winning as well don't even have full websites. Social media is kind of like serialized format. But where have you been in the? Have you approached the digital comics fair? Have you done much there? Or you prefer to stay within the realm of printed media at the moment?
Well, I don't worry a whole lot about the how we're doing it. I mean, ultimately, I like to tell stories, and I would rather go buy a hardcover. I'd rather go
Yeah.
buy a $40 hardcover and have it be oversized and this gorgeous thing. Um, so I'm still print, I'm still a print guy. But I know that I'm a dying breed. I
Hmm.
am I am not I am not the I should not be the target audience.
Hmm.
You can do the hardcover lavish production, and I'll be one of the people in line for that, but that's not going to be everybody by any means. Though honestly, in comics in general, we do things backwards from every other publishing medium. Every other publishing medium does their expensive package first, and then you come down to the more affordable versions, hardcover books and all of that stuff. We do the cheap version first. We do the cheap version first, get you to buy it, and then maybe a trade paperback, and then maybe a hardcover after that. So I think we've gotten most of it ass backwards. I think the positive from digital is obviously it's the new newsstand. It's democratized the whole thing, and you can get your stuff out there, and you can have whatever you want at the click of a button. Um, I think the digital implementation of stuff makes it a lot easier to build an audience. Um, and then that audience, if they really respond to what you're doing and are loyal, they will buy the $50 hardcover
Hmm.
because they're loyal to the thing that they've ended up reading for free, probably because it's online. Everybody wants it for free. Um, which is understandable. But there's like I know my pal Stjepan Sajic that I worked with on Witchblade, and has a huge hit on his hands with Sunstone. Um, Built that audience basically reading it for free online, or at the very least at his Patreon. So
Yeah.
people were consuming that, but online, and then when the hardcovers became available, they sold caseloads of them, and obviously very profitable for everybody involved. So I think that's a great model. However, the creators need to be in a position to be able to basically work for free, at least initially, to get the stuff out there. And honestly, writers can take some time in their schedules and do that. Like you
Hmm.
can, I'm working on, a number of creator owned things now that I'm not drawing a paycheck for. I'm just writing it, because other things are paying the bills. An artist does not really have that opportunity. And an artist does not have the ability to make that choice because they're doing at best a page a day. Um, and they've got to put food on the table. They've got to make the rent. So an artist is much less likely to have that, have the ability to do that. So that, and then you hopefully, then you got to look for a portal or a publisher to give you a little bit of a page rate to make ends meet until hopefully you do start turning a profit on the stuff.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And one of the positives to come out of lockdown was the creative output from so many people. Like there was a big, like even myself, I was able to take a project I've been working on for ages, finally get chapters and content out there and weekly updates and stuff. And as soon as I had to go back to the 9 to 5 commute, that went out the window. But it was good to see, and it was a huge spike. Sometimes though, I think the other side was a lot of people like I have this film script. I'll think I'll turn it into a comic, and they kind of found, well, it's not as it's not as copy and paste as you might think, because obviously you have a single action per panel as opposed to Johnny walks in the door and takes out a pistol and punches a guy. You can't, I can't do that in a single
It's
panel comic. Yeah.
there's a huge learning curve to it, and I honestly do some workshops myself for other places around the world. Um, and that, one action per panel thing, and how many skills you have to bring to bear to write a comic script, um,
Mhm.
uh, dismays a lot of people. And it dismays a lot of screenwriters who come into it and go, "Oh, this is hard, and that's how much you get paid? I don't want to do this anymore." You have to you have to love this medium and love telling stories in this manner to really do this, as certainly as a career, or even as a hobby. It's hard. There's a lot of work that goes into making the comic that somebody reads in 15 minutes, that nobody even has a concept of. All the stuff that happens behind the curtain, um, is a huge ask for the creative team. And the audience doesn't know about that. The audience doesn't need to know about it because it's not their concern. But when people pledge to a Kickstarter and the thing is a year late or whatever, that's why this is hard. Making this is hard, and certainly making it without the guardrails of a publisher, um,
Mm.
to make the process go smoother is even harder.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's collaboration, though, is what makes it all worthwhile in comics as well. Like, there's some people who you can go solo in your creation, if you're fortunate enough to have certain acquired skills, and technology is making it a lot easier now as well. Just simply from an output point of view, where if you're doing it digital, it cuts down on supplies and stuff. But really, I find comics works best when it's a collaboration. You mentioned that you also teaching as well and you do workshops. How do you find that from, collaborating with an artist and making a book to teaching people how to write for comics and produce comics as well? What's it like in terms, do you notice similarities in your approach between the two? It's just like a discussion, or do you notice there's a shift in gear for you when you are presenting
Um,
those ideas?
well, I initially started doing it because during the lockdown,
Hmm.
a screenwriting school contacted me and said, "Hey, we want somebody to teach comics.
Hmm.
Would you be able to do this?" And we worked out a deal, and then I had to sit down and figure out, like, how do I do what I do?
Hmm.
Because most of it is instinctual, and a good bit of it otherwise is just I've been doing it for so many years that you don't think about it. That's just what you do. So I had to sort of sit down and peel apart my process and figure out how I approach things. Once I did that, it's easy. I can, get up in front of a room and talk for 3 hours without any notes and just say, here's how we do the thing. Um, and I think the main takeaway that I try to impress upon people is that it's a collaborative medium.
Hmm.
And because most of the time it's writers that it's writing for comics. Sometimes there are artists in the audience, but a lot of times it's just writers and people who are either writing prose or screenplays or something, and they want to maybe move into comics. And the main thing that I try to leave them with is this is a collaboration, and your story, your script is only as good as the person drawing it. So, as the writer, you need to do everything you can to make that person's life easier and better and more exciting. Um, you know, Work with the best artists you can work with, and then give them all the help you can give them to make their job uh, more satisfying.
Hmm.
And people say, well, it's my story. It's not fair that, the artist dictates whether it's successful or not. Well, then maybe this ain't the medium for you.
Yeah.
Um, that's just the way it works. And you have to be accepting of that, and you have to acknowledge that. You have to acknowledge that the artist is your co-author, because how that story gets told is completely funneled through the artist's sensibilities. Um, and you get you get far more credit for stuff you didn't come up with than you do for losing than you do losing, oh, that artist didn't draw it exactly like that page didn't come out like exactly like I had it in my head.
Mhm.
And I always say, well, look, if you wanted it exactly like you had it in your head, you better draw it yourself.
Th-
And the answer is mostly, well, I can't draw. I guess you get, I guess you got your answer.
This is early on in the podcast. We began it as a series of talks at the Academy, and one of our first speakers is Michael Carroll, who's written Judge Dredd for 2000 AD, as well as his own series of books and prose as well. And when writing about comics, he made a very important point, as you were saying. It's the visuals because it's a visual medium. It's, they say never judge a book by its cover. Well, in comics, you do nothing but judge it by the cover and
Oh,
the
yeah.
artwork. And but he raised the point as well that even before we look at the visuals, so it's first color. The color reaches out. That's the first thing that registers with us. So it has to be an appeal. Then it's the imagery. Then it's the text and what they read. Then as it unfolds, it's really interesting the layers between it. Because again, as you mentioned about how other mediums like film and television can be passive. With a prose novel, you're reading, but it's a narration. So it's guiding you through. But a comic, that got a space, that kind of adding in the sound effects, it's inviting you to participate. It's one of the most participatory mediums there, probably next to video games. But again, video games have a preset of so many outcomes and character designs of the artist. Within the comic, you do get to fill in that gap yourself. It's an exercise in imagination, which I think is testament to what the appeal of the medium, which is what brings people in. Why so many people get that urge to create as well, because you're used to following the stories and participating within the stories as well.
Yeah,
Um,
you are, the audience is kind of your co-author in a lot of ways.
mhm,
And different people obviously have different experiences out of it. And I think if you don't care about the art in comics, then maybe comics is not the thing that you should be reading. I think you have to come to it. It's got to be more than lines on paper to you. I came to it. I was taught how to write comics by artists. So that's where my focus is all the time. When I write, it's breakdowns first. This is what's on the page first, and I'll go back through and fill in the dialogue. I know there are some writers that write all of the dialogue first, and then go back through and fill in the panel breakdowns. And I don't, my brain doesn't work that way.
mhm,
Like,
mhm,
to me, that if you do it that way, I think you very often wind up with very talky comics, and people standing around and a lot of talking heads on the pages. And um if that's your thing, knock yourself out. But I feel like you should be able to open up a comic and flip through the pages, and something should blow your eyes out of your head. Something cool. There should be something cool to look at. Um, hopefully every page, but at the very least, every few pages, there's got to be something enticing visually to lure you into it. And for me, people standing around talking ain't it.
mm. And who were among some of your mentors? You said you learned to write from artists breaking in and growing up in the industry. Who would have been your point of call to help guide you along the way?
Chiefly Jim Starlin. He's the one who taught me
Mhm,
how to do all this and ushered me into Marvel. But also Bernie Wrightson, Terry Austin. Those are guys that were in my social circle and still are, frankly. Bernie
mhm,
passed away, obviously. Um, but those are the guys I hung around with when I was still in college, and
mhm,
it taught me the medium, both in terms of creative context as well as the history of it. So I approach it very much as an art first kind of medium.
mhm.
I'm not saying that everybody else should do that as well, but for me, it's very, very specifically, what's the coolest we can get this page to look.
Yeah.
So you're both in terms of how it's put together, and in terms of who's drawing it. I would much rather work with a really good artist on a character that I'm not that enthused about than the other way around. I'd rather work with Kevin Nolan on Brother Power the Geek than than somebody who doesn't know what they're doing on Superman.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense, and also it's true as well. With comics, it's there's not one way of doing it as well. It's kind of what works best for the collaborative team. Also, it's like a dialogue. I've heard other creators, I think it might have been Tom King, explain it as, or describe it, I should say, as the comic script being like a correspondence, from the writer to the artist
Yeah. Oh
almost,
yeah.
where you can have like a side note, and that's with a collaboration. That's something that's always takes us by surprise, the kind of off the script dialogue that can take place when writing a comic, particularly if you know who you're collaborating with. You might just make a side note to like, dear John, by the way, please go with your gut on this one or something. It's
Oh
always
yeah.
nice to see.
I do whatever I can to make sure that I know who I'm writing for. Like
Mhm.
if, and it's become a little bit more prevalent, especially at the bigger publishers where you're just writing the script and you don't know who they're going to assign it to.
Mm,
I think that makes the job difficult, because I
yeah,
want to know the artist, understand what they look at their previous work, understand what they do if I have not worked with them before, and get a sense of their strengths and weaknesses, and then have a conversation of, well, what do you want to draw and what do you not want to draw? Like what can I do to make this to fit this into your wheelhouse, to make this something that you're going to be excited about drawing every morning rather than dragging yourself to the drawing board. That to me, you wind up with a much better book at the end of the day. So I'll if nobody's assigned to the thing that I'm writing, I'll kind of drag my heels until they put an artist on it, and then I can have a better sense of what this is going to look like and who this is going to be for. Because I write different styles of stories and scripts for different artists because it's not one size fits all.
yeah, no, absolutely. And when it comes towards creation as well, one of your biggest associations in the Green Lantern law as well is Kyle Rayner as well. And just how did that come about that you got to add to the Green Lantern Corps as well, and bring that in? Because that seemed like that's for me that would have been I think the first Green Lantern I would have been introduced to, because growing up, Superman the animated series would have come out, and then that was he was introduced, and his alter ego was a comic book artist. So before I knew Hal, I knew Kyle, and then John Stewart. I think it was actually it's funny. Hal was like the third Green Lantern I got to know, and then Alan was Alan was much later. And what's hilarious is there's an old arcade out in Bray here, just outside Dublin, and they had a Green Lantern with a red cape and all, and I've gone, that's all wrong. Who painted this? And then years later, I was like, well, I'll be a son of a. But how did it go? You and Kyle, what was the origin there?
Um, DC called one night and said, "Hey, do you want to take over Green Lantern?" And I went, "Yeah, that's cool. I like Hal and being a fighter pilot and all that stuff." And they said, "Well, wait a minute. We got something else in mind." Um, so they explained to me what Emerald Twilight was going to be. They had a sense of what they wanted that story to be. In and out in 3 issues, and then the end of it was, you create a new Green Lantern. So I had a framework for Emerald Twilight, which I tinkered with a bit, but they gave them the story that they were looking for, which was move Hal off stage and get rid of the Guardians and the Corps and just start over. And then the start over part was essentially just go make up a Green Lantern. And there was not a lot of direction involved. It was just here, come up with what you want to come up with. The only direction was that they wanted it to be someone from Earth, and they wanted the lead to still be a male. Other than that, it was do whatever you want. Um, so Daryl Banks and I, along with the editor Kevin Dooley, Kyle is exactly what we made up. There was not a lot of adult supervision involved, and it was, and it was essentially, a Marvel style character in DC, where the goal for me was to make sure that you cared enough, that you cared as much about him and his life when he was out of costume as when he was in costume. We wanted that Peter Parker dynamic of, yes, he's Spider-Man, but he's got to make the rent and he's got to deal with bullshit from J. Jonah Jameson at work, and can he get a date for Friday night, and is it going to be, Gwen Stacy or MJ? I wanted to have that soap opera aspect of his life as well as the superhero aspect, because I think that's what ultimately people show up for. If it's just a bunch of explosions and fight scenes, without being invested in the main character, I don't know that people really are invested in the book as much as they should be.
Hmm.
So that was really the template was let's do a Marvel style kind of feat of clay character learning to be a hero in the DC universe, which was not a flavor that DC had at the time. Most all of with the exception of Wally West to a certain extent, most of the characters were still the Silver Age archetypes that were kind of authority figures. They were your dad's superheroes. That's to me, that was the real difference between Marvel and DC. As a kid, is that the DC books, even though most of the new versions of the characters, Hal and Barry and everybody else, were created only a handful of years before the Marvel Universe advented. Um, but they were just completely different in terms of how the characters were built. And I was much more of a Marvel reader as a kid. I read Spider-Man and a bunch of other Marvel stuff uh, much more readily than I did DC stuff. I don't think I really plugged into DC very much on a regular basis before Teen Titans, before the Wolfman Perez Teen Titans, which was very much a Marvel book. It
Hmm.
was it really.
And what was the big break for you into comics as well? So what was your first foray into professional comics, as it were? Were you because some when I asked this question, it's ranged from people who are just fortunate to be living in New York and literally walked in and got an interview or showed a portfolio, to others who went the long way around of starting in film and TV and then found their way in. So what's the secret origin for yourself, Ron, to get in?
Yeah, everybody's break-in story is different. Mine is Jim Starlin said, "Hey, do you want to write comics?" And I went, "Okay." I was like a 22-year-old kid, and I had copy edited Jim's prose novel, and he liked what I did well enough with that he said, "Hey, you should probably think about this." And obviously, it was a boom time in the '90s, and books were selling hundreds of thousands of copies. So Jim had me co-write a few Surfer issues with him. Um, and then when he left the Surfer book, the monthly Surfer book, to go do Infinity Gauntlet, he he obviously, so through blackmail or threats, I would assume, um, convinced Marvel to hand the book over to me. And so within a year, I guess, I was writing the Surfer book regularly. So the first comic script I ever wrote was for Silver Surfer.
Hmm.
Like I didn't do any. I mean, this is a terrible origin story because you can't like nobody can learn anything from this other than you should be friends with Jim Starlin. Um, but I didn't do any small press stuff. I didn't do like I was just like handed here's an issue of Silver Surfer, write it. And I did, and it turned out I could do it, and I got it. Um, and I've literally been doing it ever since.
We'll put Jim Stalin's email at the end of the podcast for everyone to
Yeah.
email. And how do you find the difference between creator own and writing for one of the bigger publishers then? Because obviously it's swings and roundabouts, I suppose. With the bigger publishers, you guarantee, well, allegedly you guarantee the paycheck for the work to come in. But then when it's creator own, you own the nuts and bolts. But as you pointed out, it might involve you doing the work upfront, and it could be a while before you receive the remuneration on it. So, have you struck a balance in your own career and how you approach or tackle that yet, or is it just it's whatever
It's
project comes to you first?
well, whatever one comes to you and whatever one, has the hottest deadline attached to it.
Yeah.
So in terms of how I approach the work, I don't approach it any differently, whether it's creator owned or company owned. It's or
Mhm.
what work for hire. It's um, it's the same sort of the job is the same either way.
Mhm.
So I don't approach the job itself any differently. You know that you're going to get more feedback when you're doing a work for hire job because you're playing with somebody else's toys, and you have to be okay with it going in. Obviously, there are levels of feedback of input that you have to decide what your comfort level is and what you're willing to put up with. Generally, I have not had very many issues with that sort of thing throughout my
Mhm.
career. But it's, the job is the same, but it's a different job because one, there's nobody to tell you anything. You just do what you want on create your own stuff, and it's
Mhm.
completely yours and the artist that you're working with. And on work for hire, yes, the cool part is you get to write Superman or Silver Surfer or Darth Vader or whatever it is, which is great, which is one of the allures of being in this business is you get to play with those toys that meant something to you when you were 10 years old. That's a great itch to scratch. Um, but you also know that it's not yours. Ultimately you don't get to make the final decisions on stuff if there are big questions. And
Mhm.
at some point you have to put that back on the shelf, and then it's somebody else's turn to play with it. Even Daryl and I co-created Kyle. He's not
Mhm.
ours. He's DC's, and there came the time when we had to put him back on the shelf, and it was somebody else's job to decide what happens to him. That's part and parcel of the job.
Yeah. No, excellent. And I've been admiring throughout this conversation the background to your office there with like amazing bookshelves, all the statues, the Phantom statue standing out to me because I don't even have a Phantom statue. I have some pops, but I don't even have one onto it. Yeah, that's a brilliant one there. With the is that the skull in his hand? Is it?
Um, I don't know what he's got in his hand. Oh, it's just two fists.
No, two fists.
He's ready to inflict harm upon you. So all of those, what they're really doing up there is collecting dust. But the all of the statues up on the top shelf were sculpted by a buddy of mine named Ruben Procopio,
Oh,
who
beautiful.
is uh, Disney animator and sculptor, and then moved into um, doing sculpture, different things. So that's a whole series of, Hellboy's up there. My samurai from the Samurai Heaven and Earth book I did at Dark Horse, which was creator owned. So yeah, he did like the entire shelf up there. He's a huge fan of like I am of the pulps and the comic strips, Phantom in particular. So it was a great project for him to be able to do all these things, and then one day a huge, and I mean huge, box showed up via the delivery with all of these statues in it.
Oh wow, fair play. Jesus, everyone needs a friend like that.
Yeah.
It was great. When we first met, it was on the floor of New York Comic Con a couple of years back. I was with my friend colleague David Williams as well, and we'd pitched the idea of doing a Phantom. Because you said again you loved the pulps, loved the Phantom, and you had done a short. I forget. Apologies, I'm blanking on your friend's name. Who was the artist? And he did a brilliant piece. He actually did it during a storm as well. He managed to get it through, and we did it for the short-lived Phantom Strike series. But I haven't even had told you yet because I was waiting for the green light for them. But Frew in Australia are the oldest running Phantom publishers. They reached issue 2000. So they expressed an interest in it. So I'm waiting to see if they'll actually run that because that'd be awesome to see that rerun into
Oh,
the
that'd be great. That
into
would
books.
that would put a smile on my face. I look, I get that the Phantom and Tarzan and John Carter and all of the stuff that I was attracted to as a kid, the Doc Savage and the Shadow and all that. They're very much niche things.
Hmm.
And that's okay. Like as long as they're there and we can, there's our fandom is for these kind of things is still maybe not huge, but it's vital. People are still keen for it. I think you like what you like, and you hope that it continues in some way, shape, or form. So far, all of this stuff seems to have enough of an audience to keep it to at least keep it moving forward.
Absolutely. And thanks so much for your time and taking to speak with me here today as well, Ron. Before I let you go, I just want to throw out there to one of our students, Craig, who just joined in to see. I'm going to put him on the spot now to see if he has any burning questions he wants to throw out there.
Uh, burning questions. Well, once a rough way to make a living by the sounds of it. But then the only question I would have is just with regards to collaborating with Bernie Wrightson. He like he's you were talking about the attraction, the creepiness as like a kid, like things that kind of put you off a little bit, but you're still like, what is that? And I had that with the Alien franchise. That was my thing. Like you're kind of half looking at the screen and half looking away, but still liking it. So just anything you could give me with regards to what was like just working with Bernie.
Oh, well, Bernie was, I lived a mile and a half down the road from Bernie. So he was one of my best friends, and I saw him at that point. I saw him 3, 4 times a week. We'd go for, we'd play racquetball at the local tennis club and have lunch, have breakfast, go have dinner and beers. We'd go see like crummy horror movies together and then get pizza and beers afterwards. So he was just like my buddy Bernie. So we worked on a number of things together, but Batman Aliens being the biggest one,
Mm,
that came about because we were driving back from, I think, New York City. I think might have been a convention that we both popped in at, and I rode down with him, and we were just kind of kicking ideas around in the car, and he came up with, well, what if Batman met aliens? And I'm like, well, that's cool, but they'll never let us do it. I mean, we've got to get Dark Horse and DC and 20th Century Fox involved, and Warner Brothers probably's got to sign off on it because it's a bigger deal than just a regular Batman book. And Bernie said, well, I'll call Dark Horse and see. Maybe it's not possible, but we should at least ask. And so Bernie called Bob Schreck at Dark Horse, who was an editor we were both friends with, and pitched him the idea. And he said, "Oh, that sounds great. Let me ask." And about a week later, we got a green light. We got a go ahead. And then we realized, oh shit, we better come up with a story because all we had was Batman Aliens. Like that's it. Like we didn't have any background or anything. So so we started kicking around ideas, and it was the same process as anybody else I would work with, which was what do you want to draw and what do you not want to draw? And for Bernie, what do I not want to draw? Buildings and cars. So that's why uh, that's why there's no buildings and cars in that story. It's all in the jungle. It's all in Mayan ruins, which was also that part came from me having been in the Yucatan exploring Mayan ruins a few years earlier with Jim Starlin, actually. So I was familiar with what that stuff like looked like and felt like and being in those jungles. So that's where that whole story kind of came out of. And then, I would just go down to Bernie's studio and hang out while he was doing layouts and stuff. And it was just working with Bernie was obviously it was great because, he's one of your best friends.
mm,
So you're working with your friend, that's cool. But also i- like I would have to take a step back every once in a while and go, oh, that's Bernie Wrightson. He's not just like, the dude I go have beers with. It was a very odd scenario to work with Bernie in particular. I mean, the other guys I was friends with too, to a certain extent, but Bernie was, so incredibly gifted and just it sort of just flowed out of him that I would have to take a step back every once in a while and remind myself who that was. Like remind myself who that was and what he did, and what he was capable of. And to, once every once in a while pinch yourself and go, wow, that's the guy. That's so in fact there's a page from Batman Aliens hanging on my wall here from
oh,
Bernie.
cool.
Um, so yeah, it's a great experience. You can this is a business where you can work with your friends and get some wonderful things out of it.
Well, cool. Thank you. That's great.
My pleasure, Craig.
Brilliant. Okay, so that's pretty much everything. Thanks so much. Thanks for that question, Craig. Thanks so much for your time, Ron. Really appreciate it. Hopefully, we'll arrange to see you back over here at Dublin for another show. We actually the guys are setting up a second show now down the south for Cork Comic Con now. So who knows? Maybe we'll give you a shout and you can explore another part of the island.
Look, anytime you guys want me, just give a yell because it was literally one of my favorite experiences, and I feel when I've been there, I felt at home. And I don't say that everywhere I've been, but that felt like, oh, I could just live out of a suitcase here for the next 3 years.
Brilliant, brilliant. All right, thanks so much, Ron. All the best now.
Thanks, guys. See ya.